It all began in the quietest of moments. Humanity had waited, watched, and endured for centuries. Their patience, a virtue cultivated through millennia, had been both a shield and a cage. The vast expanse of space stretched before them, the stars twinkling like distant promises. Peace had been their mission. Survival had been their quiet anthem. But peace, as they would soon discover, is only possible when others share the same dream. It was a colony on the distant world of Solara 4, nestled in the cradle of a forgotten star system, that would become the first witness to the breaking point of humanity's resolve. The people of Solara 4 lived simple lives. They cultivated the land, tended to their animals, and studied the stars. Life was peaceful, isolated, far removed from the galactic politics of the core systems. Humanity had made a conscious choice to keep their distance from the intergalactic conflicts that raged across the galaxy. They were neutral. They had no desire to dominate. They had no need to conquer. Their existence was about survival, not war. They believed in the greater good, until the day that belief was shattered. The sky above Solara 4 darkened. It wasn't a normal storm. No warning signs. No crackling of thunder or ominous clouds. The change came without prelude. One moment, the sun was bright, casting its warmth over the colony. The next, the heavens themselves seemed to grow cold. At first, no one could explain it. But within moments, the colony's peaceful silence was broken by a deafening roar, a sound like the tearing of the fabric of space itself. Massive ships, sleek and ominous, descended from the void, their engines howling with power. The first shockwave hit the colony, knocking down walls, uprooting trees, and sending the people of Solara 4 scrambling for cover. A sense of dread swept through the population. Panic spread like wildfire. The attackers came without warning, their ships filling the sky like dark predators circling their prey. No one knew who they were. No one knew what they wanted. All they knew was that they had come to destroy. The first explosion rocked the ground, sending a ripple through the very air. The alien ships unleashed a storm of energy blasts that tore through buildings and left craters where once peaceful streets stood. Fire rained down from the sky, and the people of Solara 4 were thrust into chaos. The peaceful, isolated colony had suddenly become a battleground. A place where survival became the only priority. People screamed, running for shelter, trying to find refuge in the underground bunkers that had been hastily built years ago. But the ships were relentless. They fired again and again, scorching the land, burning everything in their path. The aliens showed no mercy. No explanation. They simply attacked. In the midst of the destruction, one man stood still. General Elias Turner, commander of the Solara 4 Defense Force, watched as the colony burned. He had always been a leader of peace. He had always believed in diplomacy, in the power of negotiation. But this was different. His people, his family, were being slaughtered. He had no time for words now. Elias turned to the communications officer at his side, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Get me a signal to the fleet. Now," he barked. The officer scrambled, her hands shaking as she worked to establish a connection. "Sir, there's no response from the fleet. The signal is jammed." Elias clenched his fists. The fleet was too far out. They had no reinforcements. No backup. The only thing that stood between the people of Solara 4 and their annihilation was him. Elias took a deep breath, his heart racing. He was no stranger to combat, but this felt different. This was not just a battle for survival. This was a battle for humanity's future. "We can't survive this. Not like this," he muttered to himself. Then, he turned to the officer once more. "Find me anything. We need something more. Anything." As if by fate, her fingers stopped on a console, eyes flicking back to Elias in disbelief. Sir, there's something here, it's an ancient protocol. It's been dormant for centuries. But it could work. We have the power to turn the tables. Elias' heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, turn the tables? The weapon, she said, her voice trembling. The one we've been studying. It's hidden deep within the colony's archives. It was a failsafe, just in case. It's ancient, older than we are. But it could be our only chance. Elias didn't hesitate. Get me to it. Now. The officer led him through the crumbling halls of the command center, where the flickering lights barely illuminated the way. The walls were scarred with blast marks, and the air was thick with dust and smoke. But there was no time for fear. There was no time for hesitation. They reached the underground vault, a heavily secured area beneath the colony's central facility. As the doors opened with a heavy hiss, Elias could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Inside, a collection of ancient artifacts lay forgotten. But there, in the center of the room, was the weapon, a small, unassuming device, encased in a protective glass shell. Its design was sleek, yet strange. Unfamiliar. Elias stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the control panel. The officer spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. Sir, you realize what this is, don't you? This isn't just a weapon. It's a trigger. A response to an ancient call. If we activate it, it will change everything. He didn't have time for questions. He didn't have time to think. He activated the device. The moment his fingers touched the controls, the entire room seemed to hum with energy. A pulse radiated outward from the weapon, spreading like a wave across the colony. The skies above seemed to tremble. The alien ships paused, their weapons faltering as if confused by the sudden shift in power. The earth shook. In the distance, the enemy ships began to retreat, pulling back from the colony as the weapon's energy field expanded outward. But something was wrong. The weapon didn't just defend. It communicated. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, a frequency unlike anything the aliens had encountered before. The ships trembled, their systems failing in waves. But it wasn't enough. The aliens had come for more than just destruction, they had come to conquer. Elias' eyes narrowed. He knew this was just the beginning. But as the alien fleet began to pull back, their attacks slowing, humanity had shown them something they had never seen before. Patience had always been humanity's greatest strength, but now, for the first time in history, it was no longer enough. The universe had just learned the first lesson: humans would no longer stand idly by. Humanity's patience had ended. And the aliens would never forget it. The immediate aftermath of the attack was chaos, but amid the smoke, the ruined buildings, and the shattered lives, a quiet realization began to settle over Solara 4. Humanity had taken a stand, but the question that lingered in the air was clear: what had they really unleashed? The alien ships that had once swarmed over the colony now hovered just beyond the atmosphere, their dark shapes appearing like ominous shadows against the blackness of space. Inside the command center, General Elias Turner stood, his hands gripping the edges of the console as he stared out at the battlefield. The once thriving colony now lay in ruins, its surface scorched and torn. The pulse of the ancient weapon, still resonating within his mind, seemed to hum in the very air around him. The enemy fleet had retreated, but it wasn't victory. Not yet. His eyes flicked to the officer beside him. She looked as shaken as he felt, her eyes wide and filled with uncertainty. "Sir, what just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elias didn't answer immediately. His thoughts were still processing everything: the weapon, the sudden retreat of the alien fleet, and the mysterious energy that had surged through the air when he activated the device. "I don't know. But I intend to find out." He turned to face the officer. "We need to get to the Central Archives." There's more to this weapon. More to what we've just done. The officer nodded, but her expression was one of doubt. Sir, the weapon, it wasn't just a defense, was it? It felt alive. Like it was calling something. Elias could only nod. The truth was, he had felt it too, a deep resonance, like a pulse echoing across the stars. And it wasn't just the weapon that had changed. Everything about the universe, about their place in it, had shifted in that single moment. They made their way to the central archives beneath the command center, a place that, until now, had been considered little more than a storage facility for old records and data. But as they descended into the dimly lit depths of the bunker, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the answers he sought lay hidden somewhere within these walls. The archive doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing rows upon rows of data storage units, terminals, and ancient equipment. It was here that the true history of humanity's most carefully guarded secret was kept. Elias knew that they had to find the answers before the aliens regrouped. The stakes were higher than ever. The officer approached a terminal and began typing rapidly. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, calling up old, encrypted files. General, I'm accessing the archives now. I'll see what I can find. Elias stood silently beside her, waiting for the truth to emerge. Minutes passed. The soft clicking of the officer's fingers on the keys filled the room as she decrypted files that had been sealed for centuries. Then, the officer's voice broke the silence. General, you need to see this. Elias moved quickly to her side, his heart racing. On the screen before him appeared a series of documents, old, faded, and worn with age. The text was in an ancient language, one that had been long forgotten by the majority of humanity. But the officer quickly translated the key passages. It says, "The weapon of ascension." Her voice was almost reverent. This weapon was not created by us. It was left to us, buried deep within the foundations of Solara 4, by a race that existed long before us. Elias frowned. A race before us? Who? The officer turned to face him, her expression one of disbelief. It says here that they were not from this galaxy. They came from another dimension, one that we can barely comprehend. Their purpose was to watch, to guide, and to leave behind a legacy. This weapon was part of that legacy, a gift, but also a test. A test? Elias echoed, confused. A test for what? The officer's fingers hovered over the keys as she continued to scan the data. It appears this weapon, it has the power to unlock something deep within humanity. But it is only activated when humanity reaches a tipping point, a moment when their patience ends. And when that moment comes, the weapon does not simply protect, it connects. It allows humanity to tap into something greater. Something the aliens would never understand. Elias shook his head. You mean, we've been chosen? The officer hesitated. I don't know. But what I do know is that the aliens weren't prepared for this. They thought humanity was weak, passive, and easy to conquer. They were wrong. Elias felt a sudden surge of both fear and hope. The weight of their situation was immense, but so too was the power they had just tapped into. The alien fleet that had once appeared unstoppable was now retreating, but they weren't gone. They would return, and when they did, humanity would need more than just a weapon. They would need answers. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the bunker, jolting both of them to attention. Sir, the officer shouted. The aliens are responding. They've sent a message. It's coming from one of their ships. Elias straightened, his mind racing. Put it through. A crackling voice filled the room. It was alien, harsh and guttural, yet the words were somehow intelligible. Humanity. You have awoken something that should have remained dormant. You have no idea what you have done. The voice was cold, unfeeling. The consequences of your actions will be far-reaching. You may think yourselves safe, but we will not allow this insult to go unpunished. You have awakened the wrath of the ancients. Elias clenched his jaw. What do you want? There was a long pause, followed by a low chuckle. What we want is simple. We want you to return to your place. The weapon you hold is an abomination. It is not meant for your kind. The time of humanity's dominance is over. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Elias and the officer in silence. The air in the room felt heavy with tension. They had made a powerful enemy. An enemy that now knew humanity wasn't going to back down. They won't stop, Elias said quietly, his voice filled with grim determination. We've just made ourselves a target. The officer turned to him, her eyes wide with fear. But General, what do we do now? We don't even know the full potential of the weapon we've activated. What if it's too much for us to control? Elias stared out at the ruined world that was once Solara 4. His thoughts were clouded, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back. Humanity had taken its first step into the unknown, and the path forward would be fraught with danger. The weapon had connected them to something greater, but that didn't mean they fully understood it. What we do now, he said, his voice firm, is prepare. We find out everything we can about this weapon, and we get ready for the fight of our lives. The days that followed were filled with preparations. The once bustling colony, now reduced to a skeletal remains of its former self, had become a fortress of sorts. General Elias Turner had watched as the remnants of Solara 4 are transformed into a hub for humanity's survival and its potential offensive against the alien invaders. But even as the base came to life with soldiers and engineers, there was an eerie quiet that had settled over the once thriving world. The weapon that had saved them, if it could even be called a weapon, was still a mystery. And though humanity had forced the alien fleet to retreat, the greater war had just begun. Elias had spent long hours in the command center, poring over data that was still being extracted from the archives. The officer, Captain Helena Cross, had been invaluable in decrypting the old records, but even with all her expertise, there were gaps, large gaps in their understanding of what had actually occurred when the device activated. "Sir, we've got incoming," Helena's voice interrupted his thoughts, snapping him out of his reverie. Elias turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for the communications panel. The screen flickered to life, and an urgent transmission appeared on the monitor. "General Turner," came a familiar voice, the voice of Commander Rylan Voss, the leader of their reconnaissance division. "We've detected something. It's not one of theirs. It's human." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Human? You're certain?" Rylan's face appeared grim, his brow furrowed. "Yes, sir. And they're not in a standard ship. This one's different, advanced, far more advanced than anything we've seen from any human fleet." Elias felt a sinking sensation in his gut. Could it be the remnants of Earth's other colonies, or was it something else? Something alien? He had to know more. "Send me the coordinates," Elias ordered. "I'm coming to the control room now." As he made his way to the main command center, the chaos that had once reigned throughout Solara 4 now felt subdued, almost controlled. The soldiers had begun to settle into their roles, but their anxiety was palpable. They had faced the aliens' wrath, and although they had survived, the question of what came next was still unanswered. Elias stepped into the center, where a large holographic map of the system was projected. Around the table, his officers stood, looking at him with a mix of apprehension and uncertainty. Helena turned to him as he approached. "Sir, this ship doesn't match any known design. We're tracking it, but it's moving too quickly, too erratically. It doesn't behave like a standard craft. It seems to be coming from the direction of the destroyed base." Elias clenched his jaw. The weapon, the energy pulse, had been activated from that very location. What if this unknown ship had something to do with the weapon's awakening? It could be a response from an even more powerful force. "Get me Commander Voss again," Elias barked, as his mind raced with possibilities. Within moments, Ryland's face reappeared on the screen. "General, I've got the coordinates for the ship. It's entering our perimeter. We're out of time." Elias' eyes narrowed. "What do we know about its capabilities?" Ryland hesitated before answering. "It's too fast. We can't lock onto it for long enough to analyze its weaponry. But one thing is certain, it's not just human. It's something else. Something I've never seen before." Elias gritted his teeth. They had faced the wrath of the aliens, but now it seemed they were dealing with an even more elusive threat. If this ship was connected to the weapon in any way, they could be facing something they were completely unprepared for. He glanced around the room at the other officers. "Prepare a team for immediate deployment. We need to intercept this ship and learn everything we can." The team was assembled quickly. Elias, along with Helena, Ryland, and a handful of elite soldiers, boarded one of the last remaining human ships that had survived the alien assault. The ship was small but maneuverable, designed for high-speed chases and quick strikes. The journey to the unknown craft was tense, with each minute dragging on as the ship rocketed through the stars, closing in on the target. "Elias, we're getting closer," Helena reported, her voice steady but laced with concern. "But we've lost visual contact. The ship is now cloaked. We can't track it." Elias clenched his fists, his thoughts focused on the mission. "Stay sharp. We can't afford any mistakes." Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, before Ryland's voice suddenly came over the comm. "General, we've got it. It just reappeared on our scanners. It's about 2 clicks ahead." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Elias could almost feel the thrum of anticipation vibrating through his chest. What would they find? Who was piloting this ship? And why did it seem to be drawn to Solara 4? They closed the distance quickly. The ship, as elusive as it was, began to slow down, its erratic movements becoming less frequent. It was as if it had been waiting for them. Waiting for something. Then, without warning, the ship stopped. Its cloaking device flickered, and in an instant, it was fully visible, a sleek, black craft, unlike anything humanity had ever designed. It was elegant, almost otherworldly in its design, with sharp angular lines and a surface that seemed to absorb light. "We're in range, General," Helena said, her voice strained. "Shall we hail it?" Elias hesitated. The last time they had made contact with an unknown ship, it had been an alien fleet. But this was different. The ship was human, he was certain of that. Or at least, it appeared to be. "Do it," he commanded. Helena opened a secure comm channel, and they waited. The silence stretched, oppressive and heavy. And then, a voice crackled over the speakers, soft, but unmistakable. "General Turner. I've been waiting for you." Elias' breath caught in his throat. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years. The voice of someone he thought lost forever. "Amelia," he breathed, almost in disbelief. There was a pause, and then a soft chuckle. "Yes, Elias. It's me. And I've got a lot to tell you." Elias stood frozen, his mind reeling. Amelia was the last person he had expected to hear from. She had been part of a top-secret mission years ago, one that had ended in disaster. Her ship had vanished without a trace, presumed destroyed during a reconnaissance mission near a dangerous sector of space. Everyone had believed she was dead. "Where are you? What is this ship?" Elias demanded, his voice sharp with a mix of disbelief and concern. "You're not going to like the answers, Elias," Amelia replied. "But right now, there's no time for explanations. You've activated something that you can't control. The aliens were just the beginning. There's something much worse coming, and if you don't stop it now, it'll destroy everything you've worked for. Elias felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What do you mean? What's coming? Amelia's voice turned grave. The wrath of the ancients. The weapon you've unleashed, it's tied to a force that humanity was never meant to touch. And if we don't act quickly, that force will consume us all. Elias felt his stomach tighten. What do we do? Amelia's voice softened. You need to trust me. I'll guide you. But first, you need to come aboard. I'll explain everything. For a moment, Elias hesitated. His mind raced with 1,000 questions. Was this truly Amelia? Or was it some kind of trap? And what had she meant by the wrath of the ancients? He glanced at his team, each of them staring at him expectantly. Time was running out. They had no choice. Prepare to board, Elias ordered. We're going to find out the truth. As the team boarded the sleek black craft, the mystery deepened with every passing moment. The ship was like nothing they had ever encountered, its interior sleek and futuristic, almost alien in its design. The walls seemed to hum with an unfamiliar energy, and the air felt thicker, more charged, as if the ship itself was alive. Amelia was waiting for them in the ship's control room. She looked the same, if not a little older, but the intensity in her eyes was unmistakable. She had changed. Something about her was different, but Elias couldn't quite put his finger on it. You've changed, he said as he stepped closer. Amelia gave him a wry smile. You're not the only one. Her eyes flickered to the control panel. We don't have much time. I need you to listen carefully. The aliens you fought weren't the only threat. You've activated something far more dangerous. And if you don't understand its full potential, the consequences will be catastrophic. Elias took a deep breath, trying to absorb everything. The mysteries, the weapon, the aliens, it was all connected in a way he didn't yet understand. Tell me everything, he said, his voice resolute. Amelia's face grew serious, and she began to speak. The silence inside the black ship was suffocating as Amelia's voice echoed in the room. Elias stood at the center of it, processing the enormity of what she had just revealed. The wrath of the ancients. Those words hung heavy in the air, and a deep unease settled over him. Elias had spent most of his life in the military, dealing with strategy, tactics, and the unknown dangers of space. But this? This felt like something that no one was prepared for, something beyond any strategy, any training. I don't understand, Elias said, his voice hoarse. What do you mean by the wrath of the ancients? What exactly have we triggered? Amelia walked over to the ship's central console, her fingers gliding over the surface. She tapped a few buttons, and the holographic display flickered to life. Images of star systems flashed before Elias' eyes, all distant and unfamiliar. The wrath of the ancients, she began slowly, is not just a weapon. It's a force. A catalyst that, when triggered, awakens something much older than any of the species we've encountered. The weapon you activated is a signal, a beacon, if you will. It calls to something that has been dormant for millennia. And once it answers, there's no stopping it. Elias' chest tightened. You're saying we've just triggered some ancient, what? Some kind of alien invasion? Amelia shook her head, her expression grave. No. Worse. This isn't an invasion. It's an awakening. You've inadvertently stirred something that was never meant to wake. The weapon you activated, it's part of an ancient network of devices, scattered throughout the galaxy. And when they all align, she paused, her gaze locked onto Elias. You're not just facing a force of destruction. You're facing extinction. Elias' mind raced. How do you know all of this? You said this was part of a secret mission. Was this what you were investigating when your ship disappeared? Amelia's eyes darkened, and she nodded. Yes. We stumbled upon the first device, the one on Solara 4. We had no idea what it really was at the time. But when we activated it, it sent out a signal. We tried to shut it down, but we couldn't. And we paid the price for it. The ship was ambushed, and everyone aboard was either killed or taken. I was one of the lucky ones. Elias' breath caught. Taken? By who? Amelia's face hardened. The ancients. The ones who left this technology behind. The room grew colder, and Elias could feel the weight of the words pressing down on him. The ancients. A race older than the galaxies themselves, with technology so advanced that even their remnants were more powerful than anything humanity had ever imagined. And they were coming. How do we stop them? He asked, his voice urgent. Amelia turned back to the console, tapping it again. A map of the galaxy appeared, showing hundreds of locations marked in red. Each one was an ancient site, some on planets lost to time, others in areas of space that had been abandoned. You can't stop them, she said bluntly. Not with what we have. But there is a way to slow them down, to give humanity a chance. We need to find all the devices. All the scattered beacons. And we need to disable them before the ancients fully awaken. Elias frowned. But if we disable them, won't we be destroying our only hope? No, Amelia replied, her voice resolute. The devices are tied to the awakening. The only way to prevent it is to shut them down. All of them. Once the last one is gone, the ancients won't be able to awaken their full power. They'll be forced to retreat. Elias stared at the map, the gravity of their situation sinking in. He had thought they were fighting for survival against the aliens. But now, he realized they were up against something far worse, something they could not predict or control. How do we even begin to find all of them? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Amelia's eyes flickered to the map. The devices are scattered. Some are hidden on uncharted planets. Some are buried deep within hostile territories. But there's one that's closer, much closer. It's on a world called Irinder. It's a dead world, but it holds the key. If we can find it, we can disable it. But it's not going to be easy. Elias nodded. Then that's where we go. We find Irinder. Helena, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Sir, there's a problem. We don't have the resources for such a mission. Our ships are damaged. The fleet is barely functional, and the soldiers are stretched thin. If we're going to go after this device, we need a plan. Elias turned to her, his mind already working. We'll have to make do with what we have. We can't waste time. The ancients are on their way. We'll gather a team, get what supplies we can, and make it to Irinder before it's too late. Helena nodded, though her face remained troubled. Understood, sir. But we'll need more than just soldiers. We need scientists, engineers, and experts on ancient technology. If this device is anything like the one on Solara 4, it'll be more than just a physical threat. It'll require all of our knowledge to disable it. Amelia stepped forward. I can help with that. I know how these devices work. I've studied them. I've seen them before. Elias turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Then you'll be with us. We'll need all the help we can get. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Soldiers and civilians alike scrambled to prepare for the dangerous mission ahead. Supplies were gathered, ships were repaired, and the team that would travel to Irinder was assembled. Elias stood at the head of it all, the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. There was no room for mistakes. If they failed, the galaxy would fall. The final preparations were made in the command center, where Elias and his team gathered one last time before departure. The ship they would use was a modified freighter, reinforced to handle the rigors of deep space travel and potential combat. It wasn't ideal, but it was their only option. Elias stood before his team, looking each of them in the eye. This isn't just a mission. This is the last chance humanity has to survive. We go to Erinder, we disable the device, and we stop the ancients from waking up. Failure is not an option. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. We leave in 10 minutes. Get to your stations. As the team dispersed to their designated areas, Elias turned to Amelia. Are you sure you're ready for this? Amelia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. We don't have a choice, Elias. If we don't do this, we all die. Elias nodded, but deep down, a part of him wasn't sure if they were already too late. The journey to Erinder was long and perilous. The ship, though sturdy, was not built for speed. Every minute felt like an eternity as they traveled through the cold expanse of space. Tensions were high, and the crew worked in near silence, each person consumed by their own thoughts. The weight of their mission was on all of them. As they neared Erinder, the planet loomed large on the view screen. It was a barren, lifeless world, its surface scarred by ancient cataclysms. It was hard to believe that anything of value could remain on such a desolate place. We're entering the atmosphere now, Helena called out from the cockpit. Preparing to land. Elias nodded and stood, his pulse quickening. This was it. The fate of humanity rested on their success or failure here. The ship descended through the thick atmosphere, the hull groaning under the strain. They landed with a heavy thud on the cracked surface of Erinder. The barren landscape stretched out before them, an unbroken sea of dust and rocks. Prepare to disembark, Elias ordered. We don't know what we'll find out there. Stay sharp. As the team geared up and made their way to the airlock, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the mouth of a trap. They were about to face the unknown, and he wasn't sure they were ready. But it was too late to turn back now. The door to the ship opened, and the cold, dry air of Erinder rushed in. The team stepped onto the surface of the planet, the ground beneath their boots crackling with the weight of centuries. Ahead of them, an ancient structure rose from the dust, its architecture unlike anything Elias had ever seen. It was clearly old, older than anything humanity had ever built. But it had been carefully preserved, too carefully. This is it, Amelia said, her voice low. The device is inside. Elias took a deep breath and nodded. Let's move. As they approached the structure, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The air seemed to hum with a strange energy, and every step they took felt like it was leading them closer to something much bigger than they could comprehend. They were about to face the wrath of the ancients. And nothing would ever be the same again. The air inside the ancient structure was thick with dust and an oppressive stillness. Each step they took echoed through the vast, hollow chambers, the sound amplifying their unease. Elias kept his hand close to his sidearm, but he had a feeling that weapons wouldn't matter here. The device they had come to disable was something far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Amelia led the way, her expression unreadable, her eyes scanning every surface for signs of movement or any indication of danger. The walls of the structure were adorned with strange symbols, carved deep into the stone. Some of them glowed faintly, pulsating with a light that seemed to come from within the very material itself. What is this place? Elias asked, his voice low. It looks like it was built by a species far more advanced than anything we've ever seen. Amelia glanced back at him, her face pale in the dim light. It wasn't just built. It was grown. The technology of the ancients isn't like anything we understand. Their buildings, their devices, they're all organic, but they're more than just biological. They exist somewhere between technology and living matter. Elias nodded, trying to make sense of her words. Every part of this place defied logic, but at the same time, it was terrifyingly real. He didn't need to know the full extent of the ancients' technology. All he needed to know was that the device was here, and they had to shut it down. They moved deeper into the structure, the hallway widening as they went. Soon, they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the building. In the center of the room stood an altar-like platform, and atop it rested a glowing sphere, pulsating with a dark energy. "That's it," Amelia said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's the core of the device. The beacon." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. It was beautiful in its own way, elegant and smooth, the surface of the sphere shifting as if it were alive, an eerie glow emanating from within. But beneath that beauty, he could feel its malevolent power, a weight pressing on him, threatening to crush him. "How do we disable it?" Helena asked, her voice tense as she scanned the room for any threats. Amelia stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward the sphere. "We need to deactivate the core's connection to the other devices scattered throughout the galaxy. But it won't be easy. There's a failsafe built into the system. If we try to tamper with it directly, it will trigger a planetary-wide alert, and the ancients will know we're here." Elias' heart raced. "So, we can't just blow it up?" "No," Amelia replied sharply. "If we destroy the device, the ancients will retaliate. This is more than just a weapon. It's a signal. It sends out a call to their fleet, telling them that the time has come to wake up." Elias clenched his fists. "Then what the hell do we do?" "We need to reprogram the core," Amelia explained. "I've studied the technology. I know how it works. But it's complicated. It will take time, and it will be dangerous. The moment I start, the system will fight back. We'll have to hold off whatever security measures the ancients have set up to protect the device." Elias exhaled slowly. He had no choice. They were too deep into this mission to back out now. If they failed, humanity would face an extinction they could never fight back against. The ancients would consume everything. "Helena, prepare the team. We'll hold off whatever comes. Amelia, do what you have to do." Amelia nodded, her expression grim, and stepped forward toward the glowing sphere. She extended her hand, placing it gently on the surface of the device. The moment her fingers made contact, the room seemed to shudder. The air grew heavier, the pulsating light from the sphere growing more intense. Elias felt the shift. The atmosphere had changed. The room had come alive. "It's starting," Amelia said, her voice strained. The floor beneath them began to hum, a low, vibrating noise that seemed to come from the very heart of the structure. It wasn't natural. The walls seemed to ripple as if the building itself was reacting to her presence. A soft, ominous sound filled the air, like a distant whisper growing louder. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the chamber, followed by a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath their feet. Elias spun around, his hand on his weapon. From the shadows of the chamber, strange figures emerged, creatures that were neither fully alien nor human. They moved with unnatural speed and precision, their bodies long and thin, their skin translucent, revealing a network of veins and glowing internal organs. "Damn it!" Helena shouted. "We've got company." Elias raised his weapon, but the creatures didn't seem to care about him. They advanced toward Amelia, who was still trying to interface with the device. She wasn't even looking up as the creatures approached, her focus entirely on the sphere. "They're not attacking us," Elias said, his voice tight. "They're protecting the device." Without warning, one of the creatures lunged at Amelia. Elias fired, hitting it square in the chest. The creature shrieked, disintegrating into a cloud of dust before it even hit the ground. "Cover her!" Elias yelled, sprinting toward Amelia. "We can't let them stop us." More creatures emerged from the walls, materializing as though they had been waiting for this moment. They were faster now, more aggressive. Elias could hear the sharp sound of weapons fire as the rest of the team engaged the creatures, but they were outnumbered. Amelia looked up, sweat dripping down her face. "I'm almost there. Just give me a little more time." Elias stood by her side, his gun raised, scanning the room for threats. He didn't have time to think about how impossible the situation was. He didn't have time to question whether they could win this fight. He only had time to act. One of the creatures lunged at him, and he fired again, taking it down before it could reach him. But there were too many. It was like they were endless, pouring out from the walls and floor, overwhelming them in waves. A sharp cry pierced the air. Elias turned to see Helena go down, a creature sinking its claws into her leg. He rushed toward her, but before he could reach her, the creature was pulled away by another, even larger figure that appeared from the shadows. The larger creature was different from the others. Its body was covered in shimmering, metallic scales, and its eyes glowed with an eerie light. It was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. The creature let out a guttural growl as it locked eyes with Elias. In that moment, he understood. This was no mere guardian. This was an agent of the ancients. And it had come to make sure they never left. "Get to the core," Elias shouted to his team. "I'll hold them off." He raised his weapon and fired at the massive creature, but it didn't flinch. The shot bounced off its scales with a hollow thud. The creature roared and charged, its claws reaching for Elias. He dove out of the way just in time, rolling across the floor to avoid the creature's massive strike. He fired again, this time aiming for its head, but the creature moved with supernatural speed, dodging the shots and closing the distance between them. He needed to think fast. He couldn't hold this creature off forever, and he couldn't let it stop Amelia from finishing the mission. He glanced back at her. She was still at the core, her fingers dancing over the interface, trying to break through the security system. But time was running out. Elias knew he had to make a choice. He couldn't stop the creature, and he couldn't let Amelia fail. He had to protect her, at any cost. He took a deep breath and charged. The walls of the ancient chamber trembled. Elias could hear the low growl of the massive creature behind him, its claws scraping the floor with a horrifying screech as it moved closer. His breath came in shallow bursts, his hand gripping the handle of his weapon tighter. There was no turning back now. They had to finish this. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Amelia was still at the glowing core, her fingers dancing over the alien interface, her face etched with concentration and exhaustion. She had to succeed. It was their only chance to stop the ancient war machines from waking. If they failed here, it wouldn't just be the end for them, it would be the end for all of humanity. "You need to hurry," Elias shouted, his voice raw with urgency. Amelia didn't look up. "I'm almost there. Just hold on." Elias's heart pounded in his chest. The creature was closing in, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. He fired another round, aiming for its head. The bullet struck the creature's shimmering scales with a sharp, metallic noise, but it didn't even flinch. It was like firing into a wall. The creature let out a deafening roar, its massive body lurching forward with terrifying speed. Elias dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's claw swipe. His shoulder scraped against the rough stone floor, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet, moving faster than he ever thought possible in the face of such danger. Behind him, the sound of the battle continued to rage. He could hear the team fighting against the smaller creatures, but the larger one, the ancient guardian, was far too powerful for them to defeat. It was relentless, its blows smashing through the stone with ease, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Elias didn't have time to think about his team. He didn't have time to wonder if they were going to make it. All he could think about was keeping the creature away from Amelia long enough for her to finish the job. Another roar. The creature was close now, and Elias could feel the heat radiating off its body. He ducked just in time to avoid another strike, rolling across the floor and coming up behind a column for cover. His mind raced, searching for a way to stop the creature before it reached Amelia. Then he had an idea. It was a long shot. He knew it. But it was all he had. He glanced around the chamber, spotting an exposed pipe running along the ceiling. Without hesitating, Elias sprinted across the room, firing off shots to keep the creature distracted. He reached the base of the pipe and leaped, grabbing hold of the metal surface and pulling himself up with all his strength. His heart hammered in his chest as he made his way toward the section where the pipe was weak. The creature roared again, its gaze fixed on him. It seemed to sense what Elias was trying to do. The massive beast charged, its claws smashing into the stone beneath its feet, but Elias was already above it, moving quickly toward the weak point in the pipe. He reached it. One shot. One chance. Elias pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the pipe, and a violent explosion of steam erupted from the ruptured section, filling the air with a blinding mist. The creature screeched, momentarily disoriented by the sudden blast. It was all the distraction Elias needed. He dropped down from the pipe, rolling as he landed, and sprinted toward Amelia, pushing his body to its limits. The mist was thick now, swirling around the chamber, and he could barely make out the shape of the glowing core in the center of the room. But he saw Amelia. She was still there, still working, still fighting. "Amelia!" Elias shouted, reaching her just as the mist began to clear. Amelia looked up, her face streaked with sweat, her eyes wild with determination. "I'm almost done." Elias didn't wait. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him as the massive creature, now blinded by the steam, turned in their direction. It let out another ferocious roar, its body shuddering as it closed in. "We don't have much time," Elias said, his voice tight with panic. Amelia nodded, but she didn't stop. Her hands flew over the alien interface with incredible speed. The lights on the core began to flicker, flashing rapidly as the device reacted to her commands. Elias's heart skipped a beat. "Amelia, hurry," he urged. "I'm trying," she shouted, her voice strained. "It's almost." The creature lunged. In an instant, Elias pushed Amelia out of the way, his body colliding with the creature's massive form as it reached for them. His gun was useless now. He had no choice but to fight back with his bare hands. He grabbed onto one of the creature's claws, using every ounce of his strength to hold it off. The creature roared in fury, its eyes glowing brighter as it tried to shake him off. Elias gritted his teeth, using the momentum of its movements to flip around and land a hard punch on its chest. The impact barely seemed to faze the creature. But it bought him enough time. Amelia, her face determined, was back at the core. "It's done," she yelled. "I've broken the signal." Elias didn't wait to hear the rest. He could see the guardian creature's eyes widening with fury, and the realization struck him. The ancients had been waiting for the signal. They had been waiting for their time to awaken, to take back the galaxy. And now, that signal had been severed. The device, this weapon, was no longer a threat.